are you, Steve?
Good.
Okay, good. The paragraph of Shema that deals with the tzitzit at the very least. I remind this to the students I teach. It is relevant to everybody in a certain sense that you're not supposed to wear a four-cornered. Even women are not allowed to wear a four-cornered garment unless there are tzitzit on them.
Really?
Yeah, there's no obligation, technically on men either, to wear tzitzit. It is really, if you happen to be wearing a four-cornered garment, then you're supposed to wear tzitzit. There's a mitzvah today that men put on tzitzit as a way to be mekayim the mitzvah, but really, technically, the mitzvah is not relevant unless you're wearing a four-cornered garment. But it is true, I think for women as well, that if they wear a four-cornered garment, they're not allowed to wear it unless it has tzitzit on them. I don't know, Steve, am I wrong about that? I think she was asking about the parsha of Shema.
Yeah.
I believe women can't wear a four-cornered garment either unless they have tzitzit on them. It's just that the idea of wearing a talit and wearing a beged katan is not something that women do. But in theory, that is irrelevant. It is relevant still to women to know that prohibition exists. At least that I think it's still maybe a different time I'll go into, but that's a little harder to to try to give you a good explanation. All right. Okay, so here we are. We are in Reish Nun Gimel. We are continuing really towards the end for the Yesh Omen. So in my edition, it's page Kaf Aleph, which I assume is to say should be the same in yours. And we had just finished discussing Tanurim Shalonu.
Try to give you a good explanation.
Oh, hold on.
All right.
I have an echo here.
Okay, so here we are.
There we go. Sorry. The last comment we talked about was Tanurim Shalonu, that our ovens, we treat them like a kira. That is, again, as I mentioned last time, how the poskim today treat our ovens, particularly because we have ventilation, and so these were not ovens that our ovens can get very hot though, but they are not there. But they're in that sense, there's the air can escape fairly easily compared to any one of these ancient ovens, which the presumption was built in a way that it could actually sustain heat for quite some time within its structure. Okay. Let's take a look in the Shulchan Aruch. We're at the sentence that says "Ve'im shachach v'shaha." In my edition, it's 4 lines from the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch text on that page. Ve'im shachach v'shaha. Everyone see that? Okay. Ve'im shachach v'shaha. Im hu tavshil shebishal kol tzorko muter afilu hu mistamek v'yafelo. Ve'im hu tavshil shehischil hispashel. So if you forget, and here the key word is forget, you didn't do this purposefully, you make a mistake. And again, we're working in the world of the first opinion of Rambam and the Rif, that anything less than fully cooked prior to Shabbos, if you're going to do shehiyah, requires grufa uktuma. Okay, that's, remember, in a moment we're going to shift gears, but that's what we're holding right now. So if you forget and you do shehiyah, if the food had been fully cooked, and it's mitstamech v'yofelo, but this kind of item, its continuation of its cooking is actually improving the quality, the taste of this food, like a soup. So it is mutter. Even if it's even if it's that category, it is mutter. Presumably, again, you didn't do grufa ketuma, but okay, here bidi evet after the fact, if you did this, it is okay, even if it's mistamech v'yafalo, even if the soup continued to cook, even if you didn't do anything to the flame and you left it there. When Shabbos entered, it was a fully cooked soup, but you left it on. That is okay to consume that soup, for example, on Friday night at the Shabbos meal. If it's a tavshil shehischil hisbashel, if it started to cook, but it did not, meaning it's not raw. Raw is a category that everybody's going to agree to is going to be allowed for meat. But if it's partially cooked, but it's not fully cooked, then according to this first opinion, it is prohibited until after Shabbos. You're not allowed to eat that food, even though it was accidental. I didn't mean to do it. Nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, you can't eat that soup. In my example, it was a half-cooked soup when Shabbos started. Then it fully cooks, the rest of Friday night. You could have had it Friday night, but you're not allowed to consume this soup until Saturday night. Now, important here, don't have to throw the soup out, right? No one's here saying and suggesting that good food should go down the drain, but this is sort of a penalty. This is the rabbis instituting a penalty to avoid people. We'll see the Mishnah will point this out in a second, to avoid that people should think that, it's okay to do this in future weeks because I can essentially get away with it. Because if I'm allowed to get away with it, every time, so I'm going to take it and run with that heter. But it's not a heter. It's an after the fact. Now that it's done, will allow you to have it. But in this case, it was.
Remember to forget this next week.
Don't worry, by the way. So as I said, this is the first opinion who says that partially cooked is not anything. And also, if it's grufa and ketuma, then this is okay. Remember, according to the first opinion, if I rake the coals or I cover them with ashes, even if it's a half-cooked soup and I leave it there as Shabbos continues, Shabbos starts, totally fine. Mutter. It's only if I forget to do those things. I forget to rake the coals and kind of adjust the flame or whatever. Then if it's not fully cooked, then I have to wait until after Shabbos to consume this. He continues here and he says, what's the difference between chashachach and avar? Avar is purposefully. I know exactly what I was doing. And I always find this funny. If you're willing to just flat out, like, I don't care, why do you care about the penalty that the rabbis impose? The rabbis are going to impose a penalty on somebody who didn't care in the first place. All right. So you'll say maybe it's for somebody else, maybe someone else who is eating their food. I don't know. I'm not sure why it's here, but in theory, if you suddenly cared, the halacha is that asr b'shneim, then it is prohibited. I believe b'shneim here means whether it's on Shabbos or after Shabbos. B'shneim, I think in these two time periods. I don't know if that's Steve Keller in your edition. Do they give any kind of parish on that? That's how I interpreted asr b'shneim. I think that it would be prohibited on or after Shabbos, because you did it purposefully. This was you were trying to shtoch the system, so the system tries to fight back. Even though, again, I don't know why you're listening to the system at this point if you've already violated it in the first place. Okay.
Maybe it means you're eating at somebody's house.
Right. Exactly. It could be somebody else's food.
Right. And shnehem is both you and the host.
Oh, you say maybe it's us or b'shneim, you and others. Could very well be, because, by the way, there's a distinction we're going to make here between the person who made the food and the others. So actually, maybe Hinda's interpretation is actually better than mine. Very well could be. Very well could be. The Ramah just throws in three words. He says it's asr b'shneim. And by the way, actually, now that Hinda said what she said, I think she's correct. Absolutely. It probably means b'shneim means the person who made it and the others. And the Ramah says it's not asr forever. He says ad bichdei sheyeh asr. It's only prohibited until the time after Shabbos that it could have taken to make it after Shabbos. If you, let's say, put the soup up right after Shabbos, and it takes 45 minutes. It's probably not, I think, more to make a soup, but let's say it takes 45 minutes to have, in theory, finished the soup because it was half cooked when Shabbos entered. So you'd have to wait until the time it takes to do that, to do the rest of the malacha, so that way you should not benefit from the malacha that was done on Shabbos, even though it wasn't really a malacha because you put it on before Shabbos. But you shouldn't benefit from things that happen on Shabbos, and you have to at least wait the amount of time so that it could have, in theory, been done after Shabbos. That's a time frame that we will see over and over again in Hilchot Shabbat. We've already seen it. So here it appears again. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah's comments here. Chavtes through Lamed Beis. Chavtes im shachach b'shah. If you forget and you do shehiyah accidentally, not the correct way. The kol shekein im shagag badin, and certainly all the more so if you made a misjudgment with regards to the halacha. You thought the halacha of shehiyah is X. It turns out it's Y. And so I didn't do it purposefully, but I did the wrong thing for shehiyah. I thought we follow second opinion, and we follow the first, whatever it is. You make a miscalculation in the interpretation or the understanding of a halacha. That is the classic case of shogeg. There was a misunderstanding. That's why in the korban you bring when you have when you sin b'shogeg is, I think, called a par ha'elam, or at least one of the situations, one of the korbanos is par elam davar. Is like there's something that was missing, or a piece of a fact, or something that was missing. Something was hidden. Par ha'elam davar. Something was hidden, and you made a mistake as a result of it. So again, that is the case of shogeg. So certainly, if you just forgot, or you did know what you were doing, but you didn't fully understand the halacha, then this is the halacha that you're allowed to, depending on whether or not it's fully cooked. The halacha differs. Lamed, something which as it dries out, it actually gets better. And even if it's inside the oven, it's all fine. Right? After the fact, it's fine. Because it was fully cooked. By the time, what's the reason? You don't really get such benefit from this. If you hadn't had that extra cooking of it was already fully cooked, and now you got the extra, where it kind of, concentrated further. It was fully cooked. It was really, you would have been happy to serve this to your family and to your friends. It was fully cooked. It is after the fact, it is fine, because really, you didn't cook. And the additional benefit is so negligible that, again, after the fact, we're not going to say throw the soup out or ruin your Shabbos meal for it. Lamed Aleph. Also, this is the case that if it wasn't fully cooked, you can't have it until after Shabbos. It is not allowed for anybody, but not just the one who cooks it. The kol sheken live in so obviously for your children, it's so not okay. But why? Because you were cooking it for them. You don't cook for yourself. You cook for your family, right? It's not about yourself. Very, very selfless. It's an interesting point here that's made by the Sharat Tziyun, and let's read it and I'll explain it. It's Lamed Gimel all the way to the bottom. I'm sorry, the text is so tiny, but that's how they make these printed editions. Lamed Gimel is 3 lines from the bottom of the Sharat Tziyun at the bottom. Points out here that Mishnah Berurah points out here that the Maggid, this halacha from the Maggid, Avrami, Eli Rabbi, and the Tosefes Shabbos. Look, these are 3 achronim. V'after Mahamagid Avram Kosa, and even the Maggid Avraham writes the Imnema the halacha Rabbi Meir the Bishova Gegochal. There is a machlokas in the Gemara. What's the halacha if you cook b'shogeg? You make a mistake, and on Shabbos, not you heated it up incorrectly, you cooked by accident. Okay, an example of this, I one time heard this example, not in our community. So I'm not even trying to switch it here. When I was living in the Heights, I heard that somebody made a mistake. They didn't realize, on Shabbos morning there was a cholent they were making, and they added more barley. I guess it was too liquidy, and on Shabbos itself they put barley into the cholent on Shabbos morning. So the whole to-do, we'll talk about, can you add water to it? If you see it's burning, okay. But you certainly cannot put barley in it, because that's cooking on Shabbos. You're putting it in and it's going to cook on Shabbos. Can you eat the sholem now? You just cook. The person didn't realize. They thought that you could add it. Because they heard maybe you could add water, which is not so simple either. By the way, is a whole way. If you're going to do that, it's these certain circumstances. But the bottom line is, we paskin by the letter of the law that if you cook b'shogeg on Shabbos, we paskin like Rabbi Meir that really you can't consume it because it was b'shogeg. If it's purposeful, forget it. Nothing to talk about. But really, it sounds like we paskin like Rabbi Meir, and we're going to see later in Shin Yud Ches when it talks about the laws of Bishul, the Mishnah Berurah talks paskins like this. So it's something to keep in mind. By the way, you ever go to somebody's house and you're like, oh, they made a mistake, a big time mistake. Just remember, you have Rabbi Meir in your back pocket, so you don't have to make a big deal about it, and you just, okay. So hopefully they'll come to our shir and they'll learn some of how you cook properly, and not make mistakes. But if you make a mistake, okay. Then what about shehiyah though? It's interesting because that's a d'oraisa, and we're leaning to a d'oraisa on a d'rabanan, which is shehiyah and chazara in some way. It sounds like actually to the beginning is that we're going to be more strict than a biblical law where we make a mistake. So he says here, He thinks so that for other people, here, even if you make a mistake with shahiyah, not purposeful, but an accidental mistake, that for other people, it should be okay. Okay, it's a little penalty. You made a mistake. So, you'll wait until after Shabbos to eat your soup, but you can feed it to other people. And as the Hagos Mordechai wants to say, well, the Gra is the one who paskin, who makes this psak that we follow the Meir. Achronim go back and forth. It's the Gra, it's the Vilna Gaon, who takes this position. The Vilna Gaon says we follow Meir. Even the Gra in this situation didn't like being lenient. Because the Gra himself, the Sofa Saif, he says, he says, no, it's not allowed for anybody on Shabbos until after Shabbos, not like the Hagos Mordechai, etc., etc. But this is where, when you're, I'm not the most experienced rabbi, but when you're a Rav, you have to know, people ask you questions, and suddenly you're somewhere on Shabbos, and they make a mistake heating it up like that. You have two choices sometimes. You can make a scene about it, but you could try to I don't want it. Or you could just remember that sometimes there are differing opinions. Like, here's a situation where if somebody did shahiyah improperly, which is not a normal circumstance to run into, but in the back of your mind, remembering, right, there the Hagos Mordechai, and there's some reason to maybe think that there's something to rely on. It's something to always keep in your back pocket. When you're dealing with difficult situations where you're maybe a guest somewhere and maybe you realize something was not done properly, just remember that. Okay, so I wanted to point that out here. There is a further lenient opinion about how to deal with a situation of somebody who makes a mistake with regards to Shia. We'll talk about when it comes to Chazar. I'll point out a kula, which I think is more helpful than even the one I just pointed out. When you're in a situation where somebody did something that they didn't realize is not okay. Okay. Next comment of the Mishnah Berurah, Lamed Beis, until Motzei Shabbos, you're not allowed to have this soup, in my example, soup until after Motzei Shabbos. The Hagos Ashri explains, the time here after Motzei Shabbos we're talking about is the time it takes to have finished making that soup. It's the same as the Ramah is going to point out in a moment when it comes to violating on purposefully. Okay, again, why? Because you don't want to benefit from something that was done improperly on Shabbos. So you take that same amount of time and you sort of, penalize yourself that distance after Shabbos. Okay. The Rambam apparently, it seems like it's really right after Shabbos, but okay, that amount of time is probably negligible in terms of making some important, these important decisions. So, I'm not sure. I would say that probably we're machmir for the Bichdei Sheyasu part, but you have upon whom to rely if you need to eat that soup right after Shabbos. Okay, Lamed Gimel. Oh, sorry, no, we didn't read that part. Okay, let's go up to the Ramah now, where it says the Im Chaziram. So here we're jumping a little bit because I told you Sif Aleph is all about Shahiyah, and after this comment of the Ramah, we're going to switch gears to the Yesh Omer, to that second opinion, which I've been telling you for a few weeks we're going to get to. We're just about there. But while we're on the topic of penalties, what you're not allowed to do with food if you've made a mistake with Shahiyah, again, Shahiyah being food from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, what is the penalty if we make a mistake with Chazara, returning food back to the fire on Shabbos? So it's not going to talk about the laws of Chazara yet. We're just going to talk about the penalty, and then we're going to talk about the rest of Shahiyah. When we get to Sif Beis, which will probably take another week or two, we will talk about Chazara. But again, the Ramah, I guess once the comments were coming out about the penalties, let's talk about all the penalties. Okay, so he writes here, "V'im hachaziram eino Yehudi b'Shabbos." If let's say you have a non-Jew, you instruct a non-Jew to do Chazara for you on Shabbos. Please put this again, and it's not a situation where you're allowed to do it. Okay, we're gonna talk about situations where Chazara is allowed and how to do it properly. And there are Tinoi Chazar. There are sort of conditions that must be met in order for Chazara to be done properly. So this is not to say you can't heat up food. But if, let's say, you do it in a way that is not proper, and you ask a non-Jew to do it, so you didn't do it yourself, you ask a non-Jew to do it, So dino kishachach v'shahad. The halacha is like shachach v'shahad, where if it was fully cooked food, and it's just mitstamek v'yafila, and it's improving it, because it concentrates the food more, but it was really fully cooked beforehand. Then the halacha of shachach v'shahad, as we talked about, is it's mutter to eat bidi evet, after the fact. I just went one word onto the next page. I'm just talking out what is the comparison here. If it's, according to the first opinion, partially cooked, then the penalty would be for chazara that you can't have the food until after Shabbos. Now, this is confusing because we also don't, well, yes, I'm sorry, I'm not going to confuse this any further. Again, if you do chazara through a non-Jew, as the Mishnah Berurah says, let's read now as I review that last point. Lamed Gimel, hachaziram einu litzorech Yisrael, meaning it's for the need of the Jew, not the non-Jew who decided on their own to heat up the food. And lo and behold, I was like, I'd love to have a bite of that too. It's my food, by the way, and they live in my house or they work there, and they're allowed to heat up my food. I told them, the general arrangement is like, you do what you want with my food, and they take a bowl of something soup, fully cooked soup. Put it on the stovetop, they heat it up, they give themselves a bowl. Now I have hot soup just sitting on the stovetop. And I'm like, you know what? I'd like to have a bowl too. So can you do that? The answer is after the fact, you probably can. But they have to heat it up for themselves. If they're heating it up for you, which is the more likely scenario, the first scenario is not impossible though. But if they're heating it up for you, Tzorech Yisrael, Dino Kishachach, so Lamed Daled, the mashanasa al yedei eno Yehudi b'mezid. Even if you do it on purpose, you know that you're not allowed to do this, and you tell the non-Jew here, can you do this for me? Lo chamim mashanasa al yedei Yisrael b'shogeg. We don't treat it as more strict than if a Jew did it by not fully understanding what they were doing is wrong. Shogeg is not accidental, really. Shogeg is without full understanding. But alkein afilu imitztamek v'yafelo mutter. And even there, so if it's already cooked fully and it's just drying, it's just becoming more concentrated, and it's good. It's drying out, and it's actually good for it that there's less liquid. Let's say, but since it's fully cooked, you're not really benefiting so much from it. Therefore, it is perfectly fine to consume it after the fact. You shouldn't tell the non-Jew to do that. If they did it, you can eat it. If it's fully cooked, according to this, if it's fully cooked. Even when it comes to chazara, as we're about to point out in the Mishnah Berurah, chazara, there's no machloket. Shehiyah, there's a machloket. Chazara, there's no machloket about if it's partially cooked and somebody puts it on the fire on Shabbos, that's called bishul. That we can't do. Anything that time you're reheating food on Shabbos, it has to be fully cooked. Cholent being the one, outlier, but that's because it's cooking from before Shabbos still. That's really, cholent is really a case of shehiyah, because it's from before Shabbos into Shabbos.
But if it says b'mezid, that
Yeah.
means that you're doing it on purpose, which means
Why do you
why
care?
not just say it's okay to do it? I mean,
Right, you're saying the person who's amazing. Yeah, I always find it interesting that we talk about halachot related to mazid, that relate to mazid in any kind of halacha sefer, because it only was relevant to other people. The person who did it with mazid, they don't care. And if they don't know, then that's called shogeg. Mazid knows I know exactly what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing is wrong. So the answer is probably, as Hinda pointed out before, it's probably for the fact that other people, whether it's other people in the family, other people who are guests, something like that, they need to know what to do in those circumstances. Or if people do tshuva in the middle of Shabbos, I don't know. they want to change their ways. Okay. Keep going. Let's say we're on the top line of the Ramah on the next page. V'im hechaziro Yisrael dino ka'amar v'shaha. If a Jew does the chazara on Shabbos improperly, by acts, not even purposeful. This is not b'mezid. This is a very strict penalty. You're going to see like, oh my God, you're going to fall off your chair here. I remember when I learned this, when I was in Shir, learning this, I fell off my chair because I thought it didn't make any sense. Because remember what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Meir says, and the Gra Paskins like this, cooking b'mezid. Sorry, b'shogeg. Okay, it's fine, you'll eat it. Steak, but you can eat it. Here, if you do chazara improperly, but not on purpose, dino ka'avar v'shoha. We treat it like avar v'shoha, which was like you did it on purpose. And the halacha is you can't have it until after Shabbos. And that's like, wow, you make a mistake with chazara. That's unbelievable. So 1 second, let's just do one more line here in the Raman, then we'll read the Mishnah Berurah. I'll save you. And if you ever had an issue with this, don't worry, I save you. Being its stomach viralo, and if it's let's say a case where the continuation of its cooking after it's fully cooked is actually not good for it, dries out like a grilled chicken or something like that. The more once it's ready, you don't want to be cooking grilled chicken past the point where it's where it's cooked. There's a fine line of heating it up versus burning it. So mutter, if it's mitztameh viralo, mutter shahari lo nehane min ha'isr. But if it's, let's say you improperly heat something up, that heating it up is not good for it because it's dries it out, then it is okay. Because there you didn't really benefit from having done something wrong. You actually, you made it somewhat worse for yourself. And I just want to point out one thing before we read the Mishnah Berurah here. And this also, I struggled when I was learning Hilchot Shabbat to wrap my mind around this concept. It took me some time to really think about it. But when we talk about it's good for it or it's bad for it, we're not talking about the fact that it's warm. We much prefer warm food over cold food oftentimes, and we're willing to make a trade-off of warm and slightly dried out versus cold and not dried out. It's a calculation that any of us make every Shabbos. But we make that trade-off because we want warm food. Here it seems that the only thing that really matters, according to this, I acknowledge that there are achronim who, and in my edition I see over here that they do weigh in on this. I see the Chazon Ish weighs in on about the idea of it being warm as it factoring into halacha. But if you read very carefully the Ramah, you do get the sense that the fact that it's warm is not a factor that plays into the whole mitztamech v'yafeh, mitztamech v'ralo calculation and whether something is allowed or not allowed. It seems as though that is not the main factor in calculation. I don't know if you read it differently. That's how I read these last few lines in the Ramah. So just want to think about as we go through some of the halachos in the weeks ahead. Let's take a look at Lamed Hey and Lamed Vav in the Mishnah Berurah. Bim hechaziro b'Shabbos. You return, a Jew does it. B'Shabbos, returns the food to the fire. And it's not done the proper way that will be talked about in Siv Beis. Afilu b'shogeg, even if it's done b'shogeg. I didn't realize I wasn't allowed. I thought it was okay to do it this way. And then somebody informed me at lunch, or I learned in the Shir Tuesday morning, oh, actually, I shouldn't do that. So Dino ka'avar v'shah b'mezid. We treat it like avar v'shah b'mezid, like he's purposefully doing shahiyah on Friday afternoon into Shabbos. Where the halacha is the asr imitztamik v'yafilo, that if it's mistamik, even if it's not cooked fully, certainly, or even the food I put back on the fire is mistamik v'yafilo, it's actually the continuation of its cooking is good for it. It is prohibited. Which again, you got to wrap your mind around that. What was it? What do you say, Steve?
I'd say, do you think that their updated kitchens back then had two ovens? Like one was Ketuma and Grufa, and the other not. And
so we had a case.
Oven.
So Steve was saying, did they have in those days? Did they have two ovens like we have today in our kitchens? One which was Grufa and Ketuma, one which wasn't Grufa and Ketuma.
No.
You're saying like.
Then you put it back on the wrong oven.
Right, you're saying it could also be shogeg in the sense that you thought something it's a shogeg badin, right? You make a mistake, in terms of you think that this is allowed halachically. Somebody points out to you, your spouse points out to you, oh, no, you can't do that actually. Oh, you did that already? Oh, you're right. Because most of the time in a case of shogeg where you don't know the halacha, you probably won't find out the halacha until, well after this whole situation. But to your point, Steve, by the way, the Ramah had previously brought up there were two ovens. You had two kiras next to each other, remember? And one is Grufa, right, one is not Grufa Ketuma. Right. So that's at least there is some construct of two ovens, and you put it on the wrong one. and then you come back to put take the food off, and you're like, oh, I put it on the one that was not grufa and ketuma.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe it could happen. So this is halacha. So look at the continuation. Why are we so machmir compared to the shehiyah case when it comes to chazara? Because here you did an action on Shabbos. Shehiyah is passive. I did the action before Shabbos. Shabbos enters and it's in a state where I shouldn't have allowed it to continue to be on the fire, or I didn't prepare the fire properly. Here I did a masa on Shabbos. I did an action. So we're more machmir. Now, important to understand here, though, again, you have to, I'm not you're a rabbi, you have to know where the kulas are. So you have to know, and not just you're a rabbi, you have to know sometimes where the kulas are. Also, where the kulas are not, right? Where it's not okay to be lenient. So here, take a look at this. Take a look at this next line. For other people, it should be allowed. For others, it should be allowed. It was fully cooked. The person made a mistake. Okay, so the person themselves, they'll refrain from eating it until after Shabbos. But for the other people who came to this meal, from two perspectives. Number one, if you're the host and you realize you made a mistake, chaval, my guests are going to have to suffer because of my mistake? The answer is, according to Maggid Ram, no. More likely, you may realize somebody did something improperly in terms of chazara, and now you have a question. Do I not eat all their food that they just heated up, which will be embarrassing maybe for the other person. They worked hard, maybe hurtful. Again, even though you want to be a halachist, but maybe there's something to the idea here of remembering the lacherim shari. That's it. I'm allowed to have it. It was their mistake. Maybe they shouldn't have it. They don't know that they shouldn't have it, but that's not really fully my issue, right? And you have to sometimes weigh things in life, how that all factors in, and at the end of the day here, if it's really fully cooked when the mistake happened, so it's okay technically. The da, and you should know, the din zeh, who afilu l'shitas harama, the posek esof haseif k'ayesh omrim, the b'shehiyah muter k'machal ben trusai, hacha b'chazar shavim heladina, the halakule am b'chazar aser, afilu im nisbashel kol tzorko. He says here, one more important fact about chazara in terms of this halacha, that yes, we're going to paskin, the Ramah is going to paskin, our halacha for Ashkenazim is going to be that when it comes to shehiyah, once it's kamachal ben drusai, you don't need any of this grufa and ketuma business. But when it comes to chazara, there's no argument. That's what I was alluding to before. The halacha is the same according to everybody. Everybody says for chazara, the food has to be fully cooked. The only situation where fully cooked and yafelo, where you have this kula, where you have this kula is when it's fully cooked. Though I also will remind you, you have in your back pocket also, if it wasn't fully cooked and they put it on the fire on Shabbos, and then you show up and the food is cooked, Vaizmir, what are you going to do? Okay, so remember, Rabbi Meir Paskins at B'shogeg, it's mutter. So I'm just telling you these things because sometimes you can get into, you can feel uncomfortable in certain circumstances, and you should just remember that you shouldn't do these things. It's not the proper way to do them. But if you see other people make a mistake, not purposeful, if they're doing things on purpose for mistake, you probably shouldn't eat there. If they're doing it, they're on purpose. And you know that and going in, that's the final way not to get there, not to get involved in that situation. But if they're making mistakes, they don't know any better. Just remember this. That's all I'm saying. So, fine. And if it's mitzvah or lamed vav, mitzvah varalo, okay, even if they make a mistake, and they're heating up things that's mitzvah varalo, it's not benefiting the food, except for the heat. So even though, yes, of course, you shouldn't do this to return the food to the fire. I feel even stomach varalo, even if it's stomach varalo and it's not properly returned to the fire, even if it was done purposefully, you can eat the food because at the end of the day, you didn't benefit. The taste of the food didn't actually increase. The taste actually decreased, if anything. It dried out a little bit. And therefore, it is mutter after the fact. Now, I'm still working for some of the comments here in these biurim musafim, that I have on the side here. I want to pick up with those next week because we'll stop here because of time. because they talk about, some of the Achronim make a point. What about the fact that it goes from being cold to warm? Like that is a benefit that you do enjoy, right? The fact that it's warm as opposed to cold, it does hit your palate in a certain way that benefits you. Otherwise, we wouldn't heat the food up. So what if it's heated up improperly, and I am benefiting from the fact that it's warm, even though the taste didn't necessarily improve, because it dried out. How do we factor that into this whole discussion? So I'm going to go through this. I have to look up some of these comments more in depth because I see that there's some wavering on both sides here. So we'll talk. We'll start with that next week, and then we'll move on to the Yesh Omer, the second opinion of Shahia, which is the one as has been given away too many times already. That's the opinion that we're going to follow. And how does that change the whole calculation of everything we talked about? And the Shulchan Aruch has a great line here, which basically says all these things we talked about are nonsense. You don't have to worry about them. He basically says, all these things we talk about, you don't have to talk about any of them in this second situation, because once it's machal ben drusai, once it's half cooked, a third cooked, you don't need grufa and ketuma. You don't need any of these things when it comes to shia. When it comes to chazara, you're going to need these things, but this is going to make life on Erev Shabbos a whole lot easier to paskin like the second opinion. I
And
promise.
does all this apply equally to liquids as it does to solids?
For shahia,
Yeah.
yes, you can be mashe liquids going into Shabbos again. That's why my example is a soup.
Right.
Soup does not have to be fully. We're going to paskin. The soup does not have to be fully cooked when Shabbos starts. It needs to be half cooked. So and how we calculate that is interesting. I just happened to notice in these comments on the side, one of the poskim say that if your chicken soup takes 2 hours to cook, I don't know how long is it. How long would you put up a chicken soup?
Wow.
A couple hours. So then, if let's say it's 2 hours, so then how do you know when it's half cooked? An hour, right? So if you it's cooked half the amount of time that it needs to get to the state of being fully cooked. I'm not sure that all foods quite work like that, where, if you have half the time, it's half cooked.
Right.
But, okay, whatever half cooked is, yes. So you can have a soup that's cooking into Shabbos, not a problem at all.
Chazara?
What was that? For
Chazara
chazara,
for
it has to be fully cooked. That was the Mishnah Berurah's
Right.
comment here. There's nothing to talk about when it's fully cooked. And you're talking about liquids, and we will talk about this when we get to
That's
that.
what I meant.
Liquids are a problem because it's mitztamech v'yafelo. And mitztamech v'yafelo, to reheat mitztamech v'yafelo food is a problem. We talked about here, you have a kula of a kula of a kula, which sometimes you have to rely on if it's mitztamech v'yafelo when you do chazara.
Mhm.
So that's a kula if it's done improperly. But if it's not fully cooked, that's really a problem. Then you're in the realm of bishul.
Mhm.
And you're talking about a do'oraisa that's possibly violated. And now, if you're the guest, okay, we talked about Rabbi Meir and the psak of the Vilna Gaon, but you definitely shouldn't be putting food that's not fully cooked back on the fire. And if it's fully cooked and it's like a liquid, like a soup, then you're not supposed to reheat that. If you want to make soup for Shabbos, we do this sometimes. We put it in the crock pot the entirety of the Shabbos.
Right.
So we actually have chicken soup, and it actually controls the portion. You don't have like a big pot; you have a smaller situation. And their grufa and ketuma will be necessary, even if it's fully cooked. So don't think that if you got away with grufa, not doing grufa and ketuma on Friday night, you don't have that on Shabbos day. And we'll talk about again modern day how you do grufa and ketuma on a stovetop. If you have a blech like you put on the top of the stovetop, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how if you're using a warming tray, how you do grufa ketuma on the crock pot. All these things we'll talk about as we continue on. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Yes.
Yeah.
What about
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye. Take care.
What about a solid food? There are certain chicken dishes you make that have a little liquid in it, but when you